Have you recently got an Insta360 X3 or you're considering getting one, but you're a little bit unsure because you haven't used 360 cameras before? Well, let me get you an overview from a very 360 beginner's perspective. And for the beginner yet impatient ones, if you're a beginner like me with 360 cameras, I would say that there are a couple of things to keep in mind when you're getting started. The first one is that while filming, even if these things have unbelievably good crash stabilization, try to be stable. And by that I mean this kind of stability, but also avoid doing these things. I know it's filming all around it, but if you do this, as you can see with the sample, it's gonna do some weird stuff with the image. Some of it might be cool, but be aware of it. The other one is that even if it's filming everywhere, here in the edges is where the magic happens and where the stitching from the cameras in both sides do happen. So I would say, even if it's supposed to be omnidirectional and framing doesn't matter at all, if you know that most of your video you would like to see yourself, have one of the cameras pointing somewhere closer to this direction instead of having the edge pointing at you. And finally, once you've done that, it's the editing part. If you're an experienced editor, and by experience I mean you have edited some videos and you put them in YouTube, you probably are fine. But the key component to learn and remember is how to use keyframes within these applications that allow you to edit the 360 video and manipulate the 360 view. Keyframes are key. Redundant, I know. And third or fourth or fifth, anyway, the last point I want to make for the impatient ones is that if you're planning to use this for vlogging, which is a great option, be careful with the length of your vlog. I just recorded a 21-minute video with this thing, and basically it meant that I had to do double editing. I went through the whole video, editing the 360 aspect of the video, and once I was done, then I edit the normal vlog, meaning cutting the parts that I didn't want anymore. Took a lot of effort. Please decide when you want the 360 features and when it's just a normal vlogging camera. But yeah, really fun experience so far. And now for some more details. Once I have used this thing for a few months, I'm going to have a full review of it and potentially a full tutorial on how to use the mobile app and the editing suite in the computer. But I just had this thing for a week at this point, and I just want to share these experiences so far. So this thing basically has two cameras, one on this side, one on the other one, and these two cameras have a viewing angle of 180 degrees. So they see all around it. And what it does, or what the software does, is do some magic stitching. Of course, the stitching happens in this edge, and this also makes disappear whatever stick you have in the between, which is really, really cool. But that's what I was saying before to the impatient ones. If I'm the most important thing in the frame right now, which is very egotistical, but that's what YouTube videos are in many occasions, then try to not point the edge to you. Then from the specs perspective, you can read them all and you're gonna hear like this is a 5.7K 360 camera. And it's true that it records 5.7K resolution on the 360 view, but you're gonna be editing a lot of it. So think of it as a full HD camera where you record everything, but you're framing in post. I would say that that's the easiest way to think about the specs of this thing. I'm not gonna go through the frame rates and these things. I usually don't use slow motion, but the day when it comes that I make a full review, we can go through all of those details. Then it also records gyroscopic information, and that's a fancy way of saying that this thing has unbelievably good stabilization. Also, nice thing is that you don't need to do anything about it. This thing generates 3 files when you're recording one 360 video. Just drag them all together into the Insta360 suite for desktop, and it just compacts them into one project file, whatever it's being called, that has all the stabilization information, the 360 information, and then you just go and edit. But that's how you do it. Now, from a beginner's perspective, the first weird thing that I notice is that I'm really uncomfortable with holding it. I don't know where to point it. Usually when I have a camera, even if it's an action camera, the first thing I think is, where do I point it? How do I frame? With this thing, you're not supposed to do that because you're going to frame afterwards. It's filming all around it. And yet, as I mentioned before, I think that you should be pointing the cameras to the most interesting parts of whatever you are filming. And another way of saying it is that please keep the edges or the stitching part of this to the least relevant places that you're filming. If you're going to do tiny planets or the bubble 360 view or just rotating around, it doesn't matter so much because there's going to be movement or a very extreme view, which is cool on itself. But if you're going to try to basically point here and then there, point the camera where it matters. The next thing is that even if it's this overall view, where you put the camera is still matters. So it's different if it's in front of me or if it's on top of me. That will change what you see. It sounds kind of obvious, but something to think about. Because sometimes when we think about 360 cameras, it's about, doesn't matter where you put them, you will frame it afterwards. Not quite. Doesn't matter how you frame, but it matters where you place it. So keep that in mind. And then the editing, you can do it, of course, in your computer. So there is an Insta360 desktop suite, which is a very simple piece of software that just works. And there's also a mobile app. The mobile app is practical for using this to create, I don't know, social media posts, reels, vertical content, do some fast edit on the fly, and it works pretty well. But the desktop suite has, well, at least it has some more control, and you can use a mouse instead of just swiping through the phone screen, which I don't enjoy so much. And once I actually learn how to use these things, we might have some tutorials, so it might take some weeks or months, likely. But after just 1 week, I was able to edit the 360 video, move things around. But the one key thing that you have to learn is keyframes. So a keyframe basically is a snapshot of the current state of the video. That works also for color grading. It also works for positioning if you're within DaVinci Resolve or any other editor. But in the Insta360 case, it means the 360 parameters, which are the pan angle, the tilt angle, the rotation angle, the angle of the field of view, and then it has some of the cool presets like the 360 ball or the tiny planet view. So once you set a keyframe, the software remembers that at this very point, this is how it's supposed to look like. Then if you set another keyframe in the future, the software knows that, all right, this is how it should look now. So what it does is makes the transition that changes the parameters. So if in here you have changed the pan angle from this point to that one, in this other keyframe, this is what the software is going to do. Move from here to there so it feels somewhat smooth. And that's going to do with any and all parameters that you have changed, including the parameters that are included in the, again, these preset modes of the 360 ball, or it's not called like that, but anyway, or the tiny planet, which that's the name and it's pretty cool. And while this keyframing business will require a full tutorial, maybe I'll just give a couple of hints on remembering stuff. You might want to do a very long transition. So you're going to put one keyframe here and one very farther away. Or what you might want to do is have a short transition here, same view during this time, and then another short transition. So what you have to do is to put state 1, state 2 of the transition, and then these two keyframes are exactly in the same state, which in practice what that does is ensures that between this point and this point, you have exactly the same parameters, meaning that the view will not change there. So it ramped up or changed at this point of time, it stayed in there, and then we're ramping it down or whatever you want to do. That's the first thing, is it really matters where you put the keyframes, and you can use keyframes to change things or to keep them static. The other thing to remember about keyframes is that by default, which I'm not quite happy about, but I need to investigate whether I can change it, the transitions are linear, which means that they are somewhat brusque, and at the beginning it can feel a little bit jerky. The way to solve that, at least in the desktop application, is that you can click on the transition itself, which is the line that connects two keyframes, and then it's going to give you several options on how do you want to smooth out or not the transitions. I personally like either the slip in, slip out or the fade in, fade out. I feel that either one of them gives a smooth enough option. So basically, when I was editing the crazy long vlog, I did go through it. I did put the keyframes because I wanted to show a tiny planet at some point, or just have the view focusing on me because I was just vlogging and walking, or on the opposite direction or something like that. I was also changing the field of view when I was walking under some branches. So once I had all the different keyframes put, which was a lot of them because it was a 20-minute video, then I went through them all and just changed them to fade in, fade out, and that meant that it looked good enough. If you want to be really precise and you have just a short clip that you want to make look really, really cool, please go and investigate all the options. But keyframes, transitions, where to put the keyframes, that's how you're going to change the view along a video. So what are my conclusions after a week of having this thing? First of all, it's really, really fun. The second one is that careful with the twisting. The next one is careful where you point the edges for very long static shots. The next one is mind the position of the camera, because even if it's 360 camera, where that focal point is will make a difference. And then when it comes to the editing after you have filmed, learn keyframes and keep in mind the transitions between keyframes. And I hope you enjoyed the video and you liked the snowy bits that I put throughout. And if you did, please like and subscribe, and we're gonna see you soon for some more content, including some more 360 content.